Okay, so, if Bill Gates was the architect, the brain behind Microsoft, then Steve Ballmer, well, he was something else.
Yeah, the sources we've been digging into, they really frame him as the explosive heartbeat.
Yeah.
Took over as CEO for that 14-year stretch, 2000 to 2014.
And it was a period of just incredible growth, right? Not
Yeah.
just keeping things steady, but really accelerating,
Yeah,
building that foundation for the, trillion-dollar giant Microsoft is today.
absolutely. That framing is key because it sets him apart. He wasn't the guy who invented Windows or Office, not the coder.
Right.
He was the leader who took those core things and just propelled the whole company forward during a really critical time. And the numbers, I mean, they kind of speak for
Yeah,
themselves.
what were those again? Revenue went from?
Started around $25 billion when he took the CEO job.
Uh-huh.
By the time he left, over $77 billion.
Wow, okay.
And profits, more than doubled. So, financially, a huge period of expansion.
And we should be upfront because the sources are. You mentioned Steve Ballmer, and let's face it, certain criticisms pop up immediately.
Oh, yeah. They don't ignore that. Things like, missing the boat on mobile, maybe not winning the search engine fight against
Those
Google.
are definitely part of the story.
They are. And the sources acknowledge them, as real strategic points people debate. But the angle here is interesting. It's like, okay, maybe those specific battles were lost, or at least
With
fumbled.
the war.
But the bigger picture, the overall financial health, the setting up future growth engines, the raw numbers suggest that that war was, well, pretty decisively won during his time. That financial surge is kind of the big counter-argument.
And this is where, for me, the deep dive gets really fascinating because
Yeah.
the sources argue his impact wasn't just about those numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right. They call him a culture catalyst.
Yeah.
Right.
Forget that image of the, quiet, analytical tech CEO. This
Yeah.
was different. Raw energy, booming chants at company meetings.
Uh-huh. Intense devotion almost to
Yeah.
the mission. It's a very, very different leadership vibe.
Totally changes the perspective. It's not just what he decided, but how he led, who was driving that ship with such, force.
Exactly. And the sources suggest that understanding that unique style, that energy, is actually crucial to understanding why Microsoft performed the way it did during those years.
Okay. So to really get our heads around this force of nature, basically, we're going to break it down. The sources identify these 5 key pillars. Think of it as our roadmap for this deep dive into Ballmer's impact.
Okay, lay them out.
All right. First, his unique money mindset, how he thought about finance. Second, his investment strategy, the business moves, the big bets.
Got it.
Third, his personal habits, those leadership rituals, the things that kind of fueled his whole approach. Fourth, his core beliefs, about business, about life, what drove him philosophically.
Makes sense.
And finally, number 5, how he thought about and used power and influence, which apparently went way beyond just, boardroom politics.
Interesting. 5 pillars.
Okay. So yeah, settle in. We're going to dive deep into Steve Ballmer's Microsoft tenure, figure out what made his style so distinct, so energetic, and if you look at the numbers, pretty darn effective at driving that growth.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, let's really unpack this first pillar then, because the sources kick off with his approach to money, to finance, Ballmer's money mindset, and right away it's presented as different.
Yeah, not your typical Wall Street trader type.
Yes.
Right? No quick flips. The description is more like a long-term chess master.
Chess master, I like that. Deliberate, strategic, definitely not a gambler just chasing the next hot thing.
That's the core distinction they make. And the biggest piece of evidence they point to, his own personal stake in Microsoft.
Right, he owned a lot of stock.
A huge amount. Even after he stepped down as CEO in 2014, he was still holding on to, what was it, roughly 4% of the entire company.
4%, that translates to.
The sources mentioned about 333 million shares.
Wow. 333 million?
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's not just the number. The key point the sources emphasize is what he did with it. Or rather, what he didn't do. Meaning he didn't just cash it all out the moment he could. He didn't sell off huge chunks to jump on some other trend or, just pocket the profits.
So he held. He really held.
He held. According to this perspective, he wasn't just an employee or even CEO. He genuinely believed in the company and the machine he'd helped build. He had this deep conviction in its long-term value.
And he was willing to let that compound growth thing just work its magic over the years. decades even.
Exactly. And the payoff, well, it's staggering. The sources cite Bloomberg data from early 2025,
Yeah.
saying that same stake, the shares he held onto,
Yeah.
worth over $120 billion
Get out. $120 billion.
from that 4% stake.
Yep. Now, obviously, the company performed incredibly well, but his patience, his conviction in holding on to it, that's presented as the direct reason that personal wealth grew so astronomically. It's like the ultimate proof of concept for compound growth. Okay, so it's not just passive holding, though. His financial mindset wasn't just about his own stock. The sources suggest this long-term view shaped how he ran the company internally, financially.
Right. It wasn't just about hitting the next quarterly target to please Wall Street or, slashing costs everywhere.
What was the focus then?
A big part of it, highlighted in the sources, was fueling internal innovation, investing inside the company, building capability, even when maybe the market was skeptical in the short term.
Investing in the core.
Precisely. And there's this great quote, supposedly from a 2025 GeekWire interview, that really sums it up.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
But he basically said something like, I never saw spending as wasteful if it pushed our people to build better tools. If it made devs faster, teams tighter, users happier, that was a smart investment.
Huh. That reframes spending completely.
Totally. It's not an expense line. It's strategic capital deployment, investing in the core asset, the people, their ability to create. The priority wasn't just maximizing today's profit. It was building the engine for tomorrow's growth.
That quote really gets to the heart of it. Believing in the builders. So the sources kind of synthesize this into a formula.
Yeah, they call it the Ballmer formula, basically.
Yeah.
Believe in your company deep down. Back your builders, give them resources, and bet big on the long term.
Which is kind of countercultural, isn't it? Especially in tech, where you hear so much about quick exits, flipping companies.
Exactly. Or just that relentless focus on quarterly earnings for the stock market. So many incentives push leaders towards, those flashy exits or just maximizing immediate shareholder returns through buybacks or dividends.
But Ballmer's focus, as presented here, was internal momentum, making the Microsoft engine stronger for the long haul.
Using the financial resources to build,
Yeah.
fundamentally.
And the sources use this interesting phrase, not cashing in, but cashing forward. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's a neat concept. Cashing in is pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
Taking value out, selling stock, pulling out profits, focusing on immediate returns. Cashing forward, though, as the source presents it, it's about using the resources you have now, the cash, to create future value.
So reinvesting everything back in.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Aggressively plowing profits back into R&D, maybe acquiring new tech or talent, building new infrastructure. Even if those payoffs are years down the road, it's prioritizing future growth over taking profits out today.
Like planting seeds instead of just harvesting the current crop.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And it takes discipline, right? Especially when investors might be yelling for bigger dividends now.
You could even apply that idea personally, couldn't you? Like investing in your own skills versus just maximizing your current paycheck.
Absolutely. Taking a job with better learning opportunities, even if the pay is slightly lower initially. Investing in education, building a network that's cashing forward for your career. Building long-term value in yourself, not just maximizing the immediate gain.
Okay, so this patient, belief-driven, people-first financial approach, how does that stack up today in this world obsessed with, disruption, agility, quarterly results?
Well, it feels almost like a philosophical counterpoint, doesn't it? Ballmer's described approach.
Yeah.
It required immense patience, real conviction in Microsoft's underlying strength, its people.
It's a reminder that maybe the biggest wins come from that deep belief, that internal investment, giving things time to grow.
I think that's the lesson the sources point to, the power of conviction, focusing inward on building fundamental strength, not just reacting constantly to the noise outside.
That deep conviction seems like a theme. Okay, let's shift gears from the money mindset to the actual moves, the strategy, the business decisions that came from that philosophy.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, like you said, because think about the timing. Ballmer takes over in 2000. Microsoft is king of the PC world, Windows, Office, dominant.
But things are changing under the surface. Fast.
Oh yeah, cloud was just a glimmer. Mobile was starting to explode. Online services, gaming. All these forces were threatening that old desktop dominance.
And the sources say Ballmer got that. He saw the threat.
They argue he absolutely did. He understood that staying put, just milking the cash cows, wasn't an option. The source uses that vivid phrase again, that Microsoft would evaporate if it didn't evolve.
Evaporate. Wow. So what did he do? How did they try to evolve? It wasn't just small tweaks.
Oh, no, definitely not. The sources show it was much bigger. Real, bold strategic diversification, pushing Microsoft into completely new territory, using their strengths but aiming for totally new markets.
Like what specifically?
Well, the big one everyone remembers,
Yeah.
Xbox. Greenlighting that project.
Which was a huge risk for a software company back then.
Massive risk.
Sure.
Lots of internal doubt, apparently.
Yeah.
Way outside their comfort zone. But look at the impact. The forces point out it wasn't just some side hobby. It turned Microsoft into a major force in what's now a, $300 billion global gaming industry. That was a serious expansion of who Microsoft was.
Okay, the Xbox is huge. What else? Acquisitions?
Yeah, big ones aimed at the future. They highlight the Skype deal in 2011, $8.5 billion. And the framing is, this was a major bet on communication tech long before things like Zoom felt essential. He was staking out ground in critical future areas.
And it wasn't all consumer stuff either, was it? Enterprise was big too.
Relentless push there, according to the sources. Server software, integrated business tools, BI platforms, recognizing that businesses needed more than just Word and Windows. They needed whole digital transformation packages, building on existing relationships, but massively broadening the offer.
But the sources seem to single out one move as maybe the boldest of all.
Yeah. You mean Azure planting the seeds for their cloud platform?
Exactly. Is that fair? Was it the boldest?
Arguably, yes. Strategically, it's probably the most significant move of his era, based on where Microsoft is now. He started pushing hard into cloud when early 2010s.
Which was really early days for cloud, relatively speaking.
Very early. Selling software on disks was still the main thing. And the sources make a point of saying he faced resistance inside Microsoft to shifting focus and resources so heavily towards cloud. It wasn't obvious.
But he pushed it through.
He did, laying the groundwork for what the sources rightly call Microsoft's biggest cash engine today. Azure is that long-term cashing forward strategy made real. Real foresight.
That detail about pushing through resistance, that's telling. It wasn't just smooth sailing. And alongside these big market bets, there was this internal policy. Customer zero.
Customer zero. Yeah, such a simple but powerful idea. The policy basically was, if we sell it, we use it ourselves. First.
When Microsoft employees had to use Microsoft products internally.
Had to. Not just encouraged, it was policy. And the purpose was twofold, strategically. First, accountability. If your own product is clunky or buggy, you feel the pain directly.
Dogfooding, basically.
Exactly, but mandated at scale. And second, the feedback loop. Using your own stuff at the massive scale of Microsoft for real work. That gives you unparalleled insight into what works, what doesn't, what's missing before the customer finds out. It forces you to build better products for the real world.
Brilliant. You can't ignore user experience if you are the user every day, but not every bet worked out right. We touched on this. The sources mention Nokia specifically.
Yeah, gotta have balance. The sources definitely call out the 2013 Nokia acquisition, the devices part, as a failure. What was it, $7.6 billion?
Something like that. And it didn't pan out.
Nope. Described as a high-stakes gamble that flopped. Most of that investment basically down the drain. So yeah, his record wasn't perfect. Mobile was tough. And that specific move just didn't work.
Right. Important context. But what's the takeaway from that failure, according to the sources?
The key point they make is that Ballmer wasn't afraid to lose battles like Nokia. What mattered more was learning fast from those losses and ensuring the company could still win the war, the long-term war for growth and relevance.
So strategic perspective, again. Acknowledge the loss, learn, keep focused on the big picture.
Exactly. Repositioning Microsoft for the next decade was the goal. Nokia was one bet in a larger portfolio. Its failure didn't derail the entire long-term strategy.
And the proof of that long-term strategy, the sources argue, is Microsoft today. Azure, Xbox, the whole enterprise cloud dominance.
All direct results or significantly boosted by the bets and pushes he made during his time. Even with stumbles like Nokia, the overall direction he set proved remarkably prescient.
So when you look at that mix, the big bets, the internal accountability like customer zero, pushing into risky areas, but also learning from flops like Nokia, what's the lesson there for someone trying to navigate change?
It really seems to underline that you can't be paralyzed by fear of failure. You have to make significant bets if you want to stay relevant. Some won't work.
The key is having that clear long-term vision.
And the resilience to absorb the misses, plus that customer zero thing. I mean, truly using your own product, that feels universally applicable for building anything good, doesn't it? Software, services, anything. It grounds the strategy in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing the user experience because you are the user.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift from strategy and finance to the man himself, the human element. Pillar 3. Success habits and distinct behaviors. This is where that explosive heartbeat really comes through.
Oh, definitely. The descriptions are so vivid. He didn't just walk into a room.
He exploded into it.
Exactly. Not your typical calm, collected CEO figure. High energy doesn't even begin to cover it. Screaming with excitement at meetings, sweating through presentations.
And famously tearing his vocal cords at that conference.
Right. Just pure, unadulterated hype and passion.
It sounds exhausting, frankly. But the sources argue this wasn't just uncontrolled chaos. There was a strategy behind it.
That's the core argument. It wasn't just his personality running wild. He apparently believed deeply that energy drives culture, and that culture drives execution.
So the energy was a tool.
A conscious tool, yeah.
Mm.
He saw the leader's job as setting the emotional temperature, and he wanted Microsoft to be red hot. He wanted urgency, passion, life pulsing through the company.
Which brings us to maybe the most iconic example. Developers. Developers. Developers.
The chant heard round the world became a total meme, obviously.
But the sources say there was more to it than just, a funny outburst.
Absolutely. It was funny, sure, but it was also a targeted rallying cry. Think about who he was chanting about.
The engineers, the coders.
Exactly. The builders. The heart of Microsoft's innovation engine. The underlying belief, according to the sources, was make your engineers feel like rock stars. Show them they're critical. Shower them with energy. And they'll build rock star products. His energy was often directed right at them.
That puts it in a whole different light. It wasn't just random yelling. It had a purpose, an audience. And this wasn't just stage stuff, right? The sources mention daily habits.
Yeah, tangible things like walking through the open plan offices, literally high-fiving engineers at their desks.
Not exactly the remote ivory tower CEO.
Nope. Direct connection, physical presence, energy transfer right there on the ground floor. And then there's the other side, that almost obsessive knowledge of the details.
Like the sales metrics.
Yeah, reportedly memorizing them. Not just top-line numbers, but broken down by product, by region, even by team. That combination of high fives and deep data recall is fascinating.
And bringing that same level of intensity to every meeting, treating Monday morning like it's the Super Bowl.
Right. There's that great quote from an exec. Ballmer didn't just manage Microsoft. He lit it on fire every morning.
Lit it on fire. That says it all.
Captures that relentless daily injection of energy. And again, the sources insist this wasn't just him being naturally hyper. It was intentional. His daily discipline. A conscious effort to pump optimism, urgency, belief into the company's veins day after day.
So the idea is if the CEO is the most passionate, energetic person there,
Then everyone else levels up too. It sets the bar for engagement, for commitment.
creates a culture where that intensity is expected. The sources call it strategic morale design.
Yeah, basically using his own energy and behavior as a deliberate tool to shape the company's mood, its drive, its collective push towards getting things done.
But can energy really be a strategy? It feels so personal. How could someone intentionally bring that level of optimism or urgency without it feeling fake or just overwhelming?
Well, I think authenticity is key, right? Ballmer's energy, love it or hate it, felt authentic to him. For someone else, that strategic morale design might look totally different. Maybe it's quiet focus, maybe it's celebrating small wins really effectively.
So it's the intent and the consistency that matter.
That seems to be the point, the daily discipline to bring your best, most focused self and project belief. But yeah, there's a fine line. Motivating energy versus just too much intensity. It needs self-awareness, adapting to the situation, the people.
Finding that balance. Okay, let's move to pillar 4, the underlying philosophy. What drove him? And the sources start with something bold. Emotion is a business asset.
Yeah, that flies in the face of the traditional rational leader model, doesn't it? Keep emotions out of it.
Be detached, objective.
But Ballmer, apparently, saw it differently. Emotion wasn't a liability or a distraction. It was a strength. For him, it meant caring deeply about the product, the people, the mission.
And that caring, that led to clarity.
That's the idea presented. That emotional investment helped him cut through the noise, figure out what really mattered, and focus effort there.
Okay, so lead with emotion, with passion. But then the sources bring in this other seemingly opposite pillar, data.
Right. The commitment to data is highlighted by his post-Microsoft project, USAFAX.
Which is all about government data transparency.
Exactly. Launched in 2017, tracking government spending, societal trends. The whole mission is no spin, no bias, just numbers. It's pure data focus.
Based on his principle, you can't fix what you can't measure.
That's his core data belief.
And this wasn't just a post-CEO thing. That data focus was crucial during his Microsoft tenure, too.
Absolutely central, according to the sources.
Yeah.
He might have been emotionally expressive, but his decision-making, rooted in hard data, demanding clarity in KPIs, performance reviews, forecasts.
So gut instinct wasn't enough.
Not for the big calls. They had to be backed by logic, by the numbers. Emotion fueled the why, the drive. Data dictated the what and the how.
So it's this duality again. Heart and leadership, the passion, the caring, but head and execution, the data, the reason.
Exactly. It wasn't either. The sources presented as this powerful combination that defined his approach, makes him way more complex than just the loud guy, you know?
Definitely. And this duality plays into his competitive philosophy, too. The sources mention that famous, maybe infamous Microsoft tactic.
Embrace, extend, extinguish.
Yeah, sounds aggressive. How did that actually work, according to the sources?
Well, they describe it as a three-step playbook,
Yeah.
especially for dealing with open standards or competitors. Step 1, embrace it. Adopt the open standard like Java or HTML back in the day.
Yeah.
Participate.
Okay, seem reasonable so far.
Step 2, extend it. Build your own proprietary features on top. Stuff that only works really well within the Microsoft ecosystem. Make your version more powerful, more integrated.
Okay. Lock people in.
That's the goal of step 3. Extinguish the competition. Leverage your enhanced version in your dominant platform to make the standard, non-extended versions irrelevant or just less attractive. Basically, dominate the space.
Yeah, you can see why people call that aggressive. Predatory, even.
And the sources acknowledge that criticism.
Yeah.
But they also note Ballmer's framing. He called it smart competition.
The smart competition.
From his perspective, it wasn't about being malicious. It was about using Microsoft's strengths, its platform, its developers strategically to win in the market within the rules as they existed.
Playing the game hard, which leads to another view attributed to him.
Business isn't war, it's a sport.
Yeah, that framing is interesting. He described the sport of business as fast-paced, strategic, brutal but fair, and the absolute bottom line, you play to win.
How is sport different from war in this context? War implies total destruction, maybe existential threat.
Yeah.
Sport, even brutal sport, has rules, a defined contest. You compete intensely. You might lose badly, but the aim is victory within that structure, not necessarily annihilation. It shifts the focus, maybe slightly, from pure destruction to outmaneuvering and outperforming.
Okay, so putting it all together, the passion, the data, the competitive tactics, the sports idea, the sources boil it down to 3 things.
Lead with passion, decide with reason, compete with force. That's the synthesis presented.
Passion, reason, force. Seems like a potent mix.
And looking at Microsoft's results during that time, apparently quite effective, according to the numbers presented.
But how do you actually balance that intense passion with cold, hard data? They feel like they could clash constantly. And that line between smart competition and just being ruthless, where is it?
That's the tightrope, isn't it? The sources suggest for Ballmer, the passion fueled the drive for clarity, and the data grounded the actions. Using emotion to ask the right questions, using data to find the best answers. As for smart competition, yeah, that's a huge debate in business ethics. Framing it as sport implies rules, but defining fair play is tricky. The sources present his view, but they don't shy away from the controversy.
Right, it's complex. Okay, final pillar, power thinking and social influence. And the sources start by saying he didn't chase influence in the usual ways.
Yeah, that's a key point. No media empire, not churning out best-selling leadership books, wasn't a huge Twitter personality.
So how did he build influence then?
The argument is he mastered platform leverage. He took over a company built on Windows and Office platforms he didn't invent, and he amplified their power, their reach, like nobody else.
And that amplification turned Microsoft into
A platform monopolist, as the sources describe it, controlling the OS, the productivity suite, to let them dictate terms, integrate everything seamlessly, and make developers need to build for Microsoft.
So the power came from the ecosystem.
Exactly. Selling the whole system, locking in loyalty through necessity and integration, that created a different kind of power, structural power, rather than just personal fame or charisma.
So real power, in this view, isn't about popularity or noise. It's about positioning, controlling those key strategic layers.
That's the interpretation. Power through indispensability, not personality. But his influence also came from inner strength, his willingness to stand his ground, even against Bill Gates.
Right. The sources mention shouting matches behind closed doors with Gates himself.
Yeah, takes some serious conviction to go head-to-head with a legend like that, the founder.
But the interpretation isn't that he was disrespectful.
No, the opposite, almost. It's framed as him not being a yes-man. He believed that healthy conflict, real debate, even intense disagreement was essential for finding the best strategy. You don't reshape a giant company by playing it safe or just nodding along, even to Bill Gates.
So challenging ideas even from the top was part of the process.
Essential to it, in this view. Standing his ground was about commitment to the best outcome for Microsoft, even if it created friction.
And this idea of influence, of impact, carried on after he left Microsoft.
Yeah, the sources point to two big examples post-CEO. First, buying the LA Clippers NBA team.
For, what, $2 billion?
Something like that, yeah. And it framed not just as a rich guy buying a toy, but as a community statement, investing his energy, his resources into a specific community ecosystem, LA sports.
Okay. And the second example?
USA Facts again. His ongoing investment in civic data transparency, using his resources and influence to give regular citizens the kind of unbiased data that CEOs use, empowering public discourse.
So these post-Microsoft things reinforce the idea that power, for him, wasn't about ego or the spotlight.
That's the argument. It was about impact. Shaping systems, tech ecosystems, sports franchises, public data access, using influence for elevation, not just self-promotion.
Yep. That's a different way to think about power. How could someone, maybe without running a huge company, build influence through that kind of positioning and impact, rather than just trying to get famous online?
It makes you think about becoming indispensable in your own niche.
Right.
Building something valuable, solving real problems, creating systems people rely on, letting the work speak for itself. Might be quieter, maybe slower, but potentially more lasting.
And his willingness to have conflict, even with Gates. What does that say about respect versus challenging ideas?
It suggests true respect isn't just agreeing all the time. It's prioritizing the shared goal, the best strategy, the best outcome over avoiding discomfort. Rigorously challenging ideas respectfully, even from people you admire, isn't disrespect, it's commitment to excellence. It takes courage, but seems essential for real progress.
Okay, so let's pull it all together. We've gone through the 5 pillars. What's the big picture takeaway about Ballmer's legacy at Microsoft? He wasn't Gates, the founder visionary. He wasn't necessarily a futurist like, say, Elon Musk.
Right. The sources frame him as something else entirely. A different kind of leader, a culture driver, a performance engine. Someone who took Microsoft's existing strengths and through sheer energy, smart strategy, and relentless execution, fueled by both that passion and the data, turned potential into just massive, tangible results.
He turned energy into execution.
Strategy into reality. Belief into compounding value on an epic scale.
And the sources wrap this up with 5 core lessons, basically summaries of the pillars.
Yeah, tying it all together.
Lead with energy. Your passion sets the tone.
Think long-term. Bet on compounding value, not just quick wins.
3, diversify boldly. Don't be afraid to move beyond your original identity.
Use data, not drama. Ground decisions in facts, even when passionate.
And 5, challenge power. Stand your ground, embrace healthy conflict, focus on impact over popularity.
And the ultimate point being
that Ballmer proved you don't need to be the founder, the original inventor, to have a massive future-shaping impact on a company.
You just have to. What was the phrase?
Own the mission with every cell in your body. That level of conviction.
Owning the mission with every cell. Yeah, that comes through loud and clear in all these descriptions. His legacy isn't just the financial charts, though they're undeniable.
No, it's this picture of a leader who didn't just manage Microsoft, he pushed it, he sweated for it, he believed in it so intensely, so visibly.
The whole company believed too. Leadership through sheer force of conviction and applied energy.
It's a really compelling alternative model for leadership in tech and beyond. Impact through culture, energy, execution, belief, and rigor.
So as you've been listening and thinking about Ballmer's intense, complex style, what's one aspect that really jumps out at you, or maybe seems the most challenging to even imagine doing yourself? The energy, the long view, the data focus, challenging someone like Gates.
You know, for me, it's that blend, that fusion of the explosive emotion with the absolute insistence on data. It just cuts against the grain of thinking you have to be one or the other, purely passionate or purely rational.
Yeah. That duality is fascinating, which leads perfectly into a final thought for everyone listening to maybe chew on after this deep dive. Thinking about Ballmer's idea that emotion is a business asset, but also his demand for data before drama,
Hmm.
how might you, in your own work, in your own life, tap into your own emotional responses, your conviction, your frustration, your excitement? Use them as fuel, but still make sure you're grounded in facts and logic and measurable reality.
It's not about choosing passion or data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about finding that dynamic interplay.
Yeah.
How do you let your heart inform your drive while making sure your head guides the actual steps you take? Integrating both effectively.
Definitely something to think about. Finding that balance in ourselves.
For sure. A great place to leave it for this deep dive.